say thank you for coming this morning. We're glad to see you here. I know people are still coming in and just having a good time talking and fellowshipping out in the foyer, but that's all right. We're going to get started. Just want to say that if you're visiting with us or you just like to know more about Lifeway Church, we'd like for you to take a moment, and there's a connection card in the back of the seats. You can grab one of those. Just let us know you're here. And if you have questions, you'd like to have a better understanding of some things, write those questions down, and we'll get back to you accordingly to what you've asked about. Again, thank you for being here. Also, just want to let you know about a couple of things. This year end, and we've gotten our giving statements together. And so probably when you came in, you saw Sherry out front in the foyer area giving those out. So if you missed Sherry or you didn't get yours, please see her when you leave. Get your giving statements, and then if you don't pick it up today, we're going to try to get all those mailed out so we can have those have them to you by the end of the month. If you have any questions about that, you can see me. If you can't find Sherry, grab me. I'm usually around the back, around the sound booth. See me, and we'll get that figured out for you. The other thing I want to remind you about is Starting Point. We've been talking about that over the last several weeks, and just a reminder that if you still are interested and you're new to the faith, or maybe you have never accepted Christ and you just have questions about that, this is a great starting point. And so they are meeting on Wednesday nights at 6:30 here at Lifeway. And so if you have questions about that, you can talk to me. Dan Freudenthal is leading that group, and he's in the sound booth back there working the video. But you can grab him afterwards if you have questions, and it's just a great place to get started if you have interest in that. So I wanted to make you aware of that there's another week that if you haven't got involved, you still have an opportunity to get involved with that. So I think that's all that I want to let you know about this morning, and we're going to get started. Thank you again for being here.
Good morning, welcome to Lifeway. Let's stand together this morning and worship our God. Come, let us worship our King. Come. where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior that cursed his body bound and drenched in tears. They let him die
been around Lifeway very long, then you know here at Lifeway, children and students are very important. There's a couple reasons. The first reason is because children and students, they're our future. They're our future here at this church, they're our future in our community, and they're the future in the world. And if you want to have an impact, then you need to impact the life of a child. The second reason is that if you're gonna have an impact for Christ, the greatest chance that you have to win a human for Christ is before the age of 18. So Mark and I determined that the most important ministry would be children and students, but especially children, because your first opportunity is before 5th grade to win a child, and then your second is before the age of 18. So we determined that when we established Lifeway, that children and students would be a priority, because once an adult, once over the age of 18, you're very, very lucky if you meet Christ, because it's just so much harder. Your heart becomes hardened as an adult. So we made children and students a priority. Here at Lifeway, we are growing in our children's department, and I'm so excited about that. We've always measured Lifeway by our children and our students, and we have growing pains here at Lifeway, and I'm excited about that. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. In our preschool last Sunday, we have 2 classes in preschool. Our first is our nursery 1s and 2s, and then our 3s and 4s. We had 9 children in each of those classes. We had 18 children just in preschool. I had one of the teachers come to me and say, Robin, I had 3 regulars out, so we would have had 12 in that class had those 3 been there. I try to stay ahead of the curve in kids' life in our planning, and I was already knowing that I had to open a 3rd class in preschool. That class will be open by March 1st, hopefully before then. So this is just to let you guys know, we need more teachers in kids' life. But so if you feel that tug and you have a burden for kids' life, come talk to me about that. We are growing and expanding. We're going to reach those children with or without those teachers, because I have a dedicated staff that is determined to do that. But we could use more help. Your giving helps us reach those children and make an impact. Just for the parents that are in here that might be going, oh my gosh, what's that mean? What's that mean? You're gonna have a 3rd class. Where's my kid gonna go? We've evaluated, we're gonna have a nursery and 1s, and then we're gonna have a 2- and 3-year-old class that will meet in the largest classroom that is currently the nursery. And then we're gonna have a 4- and 5-year-old class. Still, the elementary will remain K-5, but it's for children that turn 4, like my daughter and Josie, that have a September 13th, that has been in a class labeled 4-year-olds, but she's been 5. So we're gonna relabel that class as 4- and 5-year-olds. So you're gonna have a nursery 1s, a 2s and 3s, and a 4 and 5s, at least by March 1st, hopefully sooner if we can get it there. But I'm gonna need more help in order to do that. But again, it's your funds, it's your giving that makes all of this possible. You're gonna see some reconstruction over the next couple of weeks. That's the physical demolition of some area over there. There's gonna be some more things that are purchased for that. That's your money helps make that possible. Curriculum is bought for these classes. None of this is possible without you guys and your support. Now, that being said, I want to say I have amazing teachers that give from their heart. They purchase snacks. They purchase, when they see a lesson and it's something Lifeway doesn't have and doesn't have time to get for them, they go and get it out of their own pockets. So I don't want to discount what they do, but we couldn't do it without your giving. And I'm so grateful that you guys give from the heart and make the things happen here at Lifeway that happens. So thank you so much. Our ushers are going to come forward in just a minute and make an opportunity for you to give again here at Lifeway. Let's pray. Lord God, I just thank you so much. I thank you for the opportunity to gather here your house of worship. I thank you for the opportunity, God, that we have to minister to children and to students. I thank you for the opportunity that my husband has to study and to bring your word, God. I know nothing that he does of himself, God. I know he tries his best to get your message and to deliver it Sunday after Sunday. And God, I thank you for the dedicated teachers that give from their heart. And God, I thank you for providing through this congregation week after week, God. And I pray that you'll do that again today, God. Thank you so much, God, for all that you do. I thank you for your son, Jesus, most of all. I thank you for your message. I thank you for your love. And God, for your forgiveness. None of us could stand here if it wasn't for your son and the forgiveness that he gives us, God. We love you so much. In Christ's name, amen.
There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy
Father, thank you for this morning and the chance that we have, the opportunity we have to lift our voices to you. God, you are far more worthy of worship and song than what we can bring. God, we might lift our vocals loud, we might play hard, but God, you are worth so much more. And this morning, I just want to ask that you would move and work here among us, God, that you would speak to us, that, God, we might see and know you in a way that we've never seen you and known you before. And so, Father, we give you all this in this precious name of Jesus. Amen. You can be seated. It is great to see you guys here. Excited to be here today, and we're excited that God is doing some incredible things. Robin's shared some of those stories with you, and that's exciting to hear and see. And as she said, there'll be some demolition and reconstruction coming up in the next few weeks as soon as we can figure out all the details of that. It was not something we anticipated this quickly. And so our planning and our budgeting, we'll have to figure all that out, but we're very excited that God is blessing us that way. And she mentioned children, but just on a student level, since I work with students each week with a team of people that just do a fantastic job, we literally have maximized the spaces that we're using for students, and we are looking forward to their remodeling, because when they remodel, we will get more space. And then very soon, we'll be working towards moving into the multi-purpose area that we have at the other end of the building for students. So, yeah, it's really exciting. It's pretty exciting. So, anyway, I want to start this morning by asking you a question. And the question may seem a little odd, but just go along, okay? Did any of you wake up this morning asking yourself the question, do I really want to go to church? Now, I know that you're already thinking that's a trick question, all right? I know. But it's not, I'm not going to take it personally. I understand that, you woke up tired, your allergies were kicking in, or you've had that cough, that's been going on since before Christmas. And, it's hard to get the kids dressed, and they're not cooperating. And so in your mind, you just thought, I think I'll just skip it today. So did anybody wake up this morning and have that thought? I don't think I'll go to church today. And it's okay if you say yes, because I'm not going to condemn you, okay? I'm not going to condemn you. Now, the next question that I have, let me make sure, anybody want to be honest, put your hands up and say that? Yeah. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah. Now, the next question I have is, do any of you wake up during this past week and think, I really don't want to go to work? All right? Yeah. Now, again, I promise it's not a trick question, and because somebody has already thought, you know what he's doing? I know what he's doing. He's going to say, you know you have to get up and go to work, and you're going to turn that around and say, well, you should come to church too. It's not that kind of thing, all right? Unless that's what you need to hear. So if that's the case, I'm just kidding. It's not. My point is not about what questions you ask. It's simply to demonstrate the fact that you begin virtually every day of your life asking yourself one of what will be many questions that will guide you and direct you through choices and decisions that you'll make throughout the rest of your day. And there are a lot of important questions that we ask. In fact, beyond your decision to get up, you ask the question, what do I eat? What do I wear? Where do I go? Beyond all of those things, there are other questions that have even more significant meaning. But virtually every decision you make begins as a question. And you don't think of it that way, but as you evaluate each circumstance you find yourself in, you weigh your options and you make a decision. And it starts by asking the question, what impact does this have? How does this affect me? How does this affect others? And you don't think of it that way, but you evaluate each circumstance and you find yourself in that position. And today, I want to give you what I believe is one of two foundational questions that they're the most important questions that I believe we have to guide us through life. And I know that inevitably somebody's going to come up afterwards and go, well, what's the other question? What's the other foundational question I need to know? So I'm just going to give you that question up front. So make sure you have something to write with, pen, paper, something, because I'm only saying it once. The other foundational question is, what's in your wallet? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It seems to be the question going around, but it's not. I'm just kidding. That's not it. All right, in all seriousness, here it is. What difference will this make in light of eternity? What difference will this make in light of eternity? And I can assure you that my children are sick of hearing that question. Because everything we faced in life, every decision they made, I mean, it's a huge question when you really consider the implications. But every decision that we made, everything they were involved in, every frustration they found themselves with, in arguments, confrontation, conflict with friends, everything, the question was always the same. Will this change someone forever? Will this take someone to heaven with you? Will this bring someone to Jesus? In light of eternity, what difference will this make? And to me, it is a foundational question that we should be asking in all of life. But it's only one of two. And it's the one that perhaps impacts everyone else, but there's one that impacts you more significantly. And that question, it relates to everyday decisions, and it's very simply this. What would someone in your current circumstances do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? Where you are in life, at this moment, the things that you're dealing with, what would someone in your predicament, your situation, do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? Now listen, that's a huge question, because that question uncovers where you are in trusting God and His promises. And here's what I mean, and I see this all the time. When people first put their faith and trust in Jesus and they begin to follow God, there's something in all of us that wants to believe that life is going to be better. And the reason why is because of the view that most of us have before we start following God. Our view of God before we start following God is that God responds to behavior. So when we're good, God is good to us. And when we're bad, then God is, well, He's not good to us. He punishes us. And we carry that mindset that God responds to behavior over into our faith. And if you don't grow, you get stuck there. If you don't move beyond in your understanding who God is, you get stuck with that mindset, that idea. And so we all tend to carry that mindset over into our faith. And when we first started following God, but life happens and life gets messy, and we start praying for God to fix this and change that and fix this and change that. And we try really hard to be good based upon our view, our understanding of God from the beginning. But when life gets messy and out of control, and when we pray and God doesn't fix it, or God doesn't change it, or He doesn't change him, or He doesn't change her, your old mindset tells you, well, I was good, and I did what I was supposed to do. But God did not follow the rules. God was bad. He didn't follow the rules. And what that does is it creates this conflict between what you believe to be true about God and what truly is true about God. And so it's constantly battling, which is why you need to come back to the question. What would someone in your current circumstances do if they're absolutely confident that God is with them? And you can ask that question in literally every arena of life. Every place you find yourself, you can ask that question. So your marriage is unraveling, and you've done everything you know to do, and it's just spiraling out of control, and you're pushing the panic button, but nothing seems to be changing. Nothing you do works. What would someone in a marriage that's just like yours do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? You know, your education's coming to an end for those of you who are finishing up school. And as it's coming to an end, you have hopes and dreams of opportunities that are going to open up. And now as you get closer and you've invested all this time and all this money and all this preparation, it doesn't look like those opportunities are going to come to fruition. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. So what would someone do in that situation, a situation just like yours, if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? So, you know, think about your job. Your job isn't necessarily what you thought it was going to be. And so you decide, I need a change. So you look around and you apply and you interview. And you look around and you apply and you interview. And, you know, then occasionally you get a call back for another interview, but then there's no job. There's no opportunities, and you've weighed all the options. What do? Do I quit? Do I hang in there until something better comes along, or do I just make the best of this and stay where I'm at? Well, what would someone do in your current circumstances if they were absolutely certain, confident that God was with them? See, you can do every part of your life. You're dealing with children who are far from God, or maybe they're just far from you. And you have conflict, and it feels like the relationship's irreparable. What would someone in your circumstances, with that type of relationship, do if they were absolutely confident God is with them? See, when you're right on the edge and you're so close to the chaos and life is out of control, that's the question that leads us to the kind of faith and the kind of trust that God wants us to have in Him. And so today and for the next couple of weeks as we wrap up this series, Promise Made, Promise Kept, we're going to look at a guy whose life finds him in circumstances, and I mean crazy, crazy circumstances, that no matter how bad your circumstances are, no matter how circumstances or how bad your circumstances have been, when you hear the circumstances of this guy's life, when you hear what unfolds, you're going to think, well, at least I'm not him. I mean, that's how bad his life is. But then this guy's story takes a twist, and the twist of his story, it changes so much that he's going to go from the worst of circumstances to the best of circumstances, at least it would seem the best of circumstances. He's going to have so much power, so much money, you're not even going to be able to identify with him because he has so much power and so much money. And then in the end, he gets the opportunity that so many of us look for all of our lives, the opportunity to get even with people who put us in our circumstances. And yet in all those situations, we see a guy who made a decision based on this one question. What would someone in my circumstances do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? And I'm just going to tell you up front, there's a principle we're going to talk about. It applies over all 3 weeks. I'm going to give it to you right now. When you respond in your current circumstances, whether you're rich or poor, good or bad, whatever it may be, wherever you may find yourself, when you respond in your current circumstances, confident God is with you, you will see God in your circumstances. When you respond to your circumstances, confident that God is with you, that is when you see God in your circumstances. And it's not because believing that God is with you is what makes God with you. It's simply that we allow the circumstances of our life to so distort our view and our vision of God that we miss God in our circumstances. But when you and I will stop long enough to realize there's nothing that we can do to re-engineer our circumstances, there's nothing that we can do to orchestrate and control all the little pieces and all the moving parts and all the people that are part of our circumstances, the only option is really to sit back and live as someone who is confident that God is with him. And when you do that, you can see God in your lowest lows, and you can see God in your highest highs, and you can see Him everywhere in between. Now, the story we're going to look at is it's not a short story. We're going to break 20 years down over these next 3 weeks. But the amazing thing about that is it's the reminder to us is that our circumstances don't necessarily change in a day or a week or a month or even a year. Sometimes it takes what seems like a lifetime. And for this particular man, he loses or would seemingly lose 20 years of his life in the midst of these types of circumstances. So let me pull you into where we were from last week. Last week we talked about Jacob and Esau. If you remember, we're talking about God's promises to a man named Abraham, and part of that was that God would make his name great and make him a great nation, and He would bless the whole world through him. And so part of that is Abraham having descendants. Part of the promise is for him to have descendants, as many as the sands on the seashore, that sort of thing, as many as stars in the sky. So God gives these promises, and God gives Abraham one child, one son, Isaac. Isaac has 2 children, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob and Esau have conflict throughout their lives because basically they're just 2 different types of people. We said this last week. Esau is the rugged outdoors type. You know, he drives the 4-wheel drive with the Semper Fi decal on the back window. You know, that's the kind of guy he is. Jacob, not so much. He's got a Pinterest account, and he drives a Mini Cooper and that kind of thing. So anyway, you got these 2 guys who are just not anything alike. And they have conflict, but ultimately their conflict comes when Jacob robs Esau of the blessing of his father. And that sets in motion what will take years to unfold for a moment of reconciliation where Jacob and Esau will have a chance to reconcile their relationships. And I told you last week that as you're reconciling relationships, all of us must consider that there is so much more at stake than we realize. Future generations are at stake. In fact, I told you that Jacob had a son, a young son. It was the son that he shared with Rachel. And at the back of the line, after he sent all of his families and all of his animals and all of his servants all through in front of his brother Esau, at the back of the line is Rachel and Jacob. Joseph. And on that day, Joseph watches as Jacob and Esau reconcile their relationship. So today we're going to pick up the story of Joseph, the son. Genesis 37, verse 2, it says this, "These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers." So he's a shepherd. "He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives." So this is just crazy, but I'll tell you what happens. Jacob, whenever he ran for his life because Esau was out to get him after he stole his father's birthright, his mother sends him to his uncle Laban. And there, which this was part of their custom that day, you would go back and marry within your family. We don't do that unless you live in West Virginia. But anyway, Jacob goes back to Laban. Okay, I didn't mean anybody from West Virginia or your spouse or anybody. Anyway, so Jacob goes. He goes to Laban, and Laban has two daughters, Rachel and Leah. And Jacob falls in love with Rachel, and Rachel falls in love with Jacob. And so he asks to marry Rachel. And Laban exchanges 7 years of labor in exchange for Rachel to marry. But the way that weddings were done back then, basically what would happen on the night of the wedding, the bride would just come into the tent of the man, and the marriage would be consummated, and that's how all that went down. Well, Laban sends the other daughter, Leah, in. So that night, Joseph. It is Jacob. I don't know. Too many J's. Jacob consummates his marriage with Leah. And the next morning he wakes up. So imagine his surprise. He wakes up, and I don't think I mentioned that Leah is not a very attractive young lady. And so he's disappointed and pretty mad. And so he goes to Laban, and Laban says, "Look, we don't marry our younger daughters before we marry our older daughters, and Leah's the oldest, so that's just the way it turns out." And he goes, "Well, I want to marry Rachel," and they work out a deal, and he gets to marry Rachel. So anyway, Rachel and Leah begin to have this competition over who can provide Jacob with the most children. And Rachel's barren. She can't have any children. Leah has some children. Then Rachel, after not being able to have children, says, "You know what? I'll fix this." She gives her maidservant to Jacob so that Jacob can have children through her maidservant. Well, Leah says, "Well, you're not going to get one over me. I'll give my maidservant too." Now, Jacob's just all smiles at this point, okay? But Rachel and Leah and these maidservants go back and forth with who's going to be with Jacob, and ultimately he has all these children. I mean, that's how God starts making the promise of a great nation come true, okay? We wouldn't write a story like that. But God's making this story come to pass. Well, finally, Rachel, the barren one, has a child, a son, Joseph, the son that we're talking about today. And since Rachel is Jacob's favorite wife, the one he loves the most, Joseph is his favorite son. And Joseph has no problem enjoying the favoritism of his father. And so it says, as Joseph brought about a bad report to them of his brothers, to their father, now Israel, and that would be Jacob's name. It's been changed now. We changed that last week. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of the other sons. These other sons are all shepherds, they're all out herding sheep. And Joseph comes back with this bad report, and Jacob loves him more than the other sons. Well, his other sons aren't doing what they're supposed to do, and so he rewards him, and he made him a robe that was colorful, a robe of many colors. You've probably heard the coat of many colors story if you've been around church. But when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So there's conflict. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. So there's conflict and there's tension. And by the way, Joseph's dream, when interpreted, which he interpreted for them, meant that Joseph's brothers, who were older than him, all are older, they're going to bow down to him. So imagine if you have siblings and you're the oldest, that your youngest sibling says, no, you're going to bow down to me. I'm going to be in charge of you. Okay, so if you can imagine, and so Joseph, he may have been a little arrogant. I don't want to read that into the story, but the bottom line is snitches get stitches, right? And one afternoon, Jacob sends Joseph to find his brothers and to report on them. And so he goes to look for them, and they've moved from where they're supposed to be. They're miles and miles away, but Joseph finds them. And as he's approaching, his brothers see him coming, and they say to each other, there comes the dreamer, because he's the one that had the dream and interpreted the dream. And now they think is our opportunity to get rid of him once and for all. So when Joseph, verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. So if you can possibly imagine the chaos of this, they strip Joseph of his clothes. They throw him down into an empty well. They sit down to have lunch. And Joseph is probably in the well going, guys, hey guys, are you out there? This isn't funny anymore. Come on, guys. And the guys are going, you hear anything? I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything either. You know, Reuben, do you hear anything? I don't hear. Judah, do you hear anything? I don't hear anything. Come on. Come on, guys, get me out of here. But they just sit there and they eat their lunch. Meanwhile, it says, in looking up, they looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum and balm and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? To which his brothers reply, well, that's true. Why don't we leverage this for our benefit? Why don't we get something out of this? I mean, if we just kill him, I mean, sure, he's gone. We don't have to listen to him anymore, but, you know, we really aren't getting anything out of it. So it says, they said, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For, and this is so funny, for he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. So it's almost like in just that moment they have a little mercy. Well, let's show some mercy. Let's not kill him. He is family. But anyway, they don't have a problem selling him. And it says, and his brothers listened, and the Midianite traders passed by, or then they passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, the well, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. So Joseph is on his way to Egypt. It's nothing of his doing. I mean, maybe he's a little bit of a tattletale. Maybe he's bragged a little bit, but we don't even know that. Okay, I'm reading that into that. But he did what his father told him to do. He went to check on his brothers. Now, come on, God. God, you need to pay attention to this. This kid didn't do anything. They've stripped him of everything he owns. They've thrown him in a pit. They've left him to die. And then at the last minute, with some glimmer of mercy, they decide, no, let's not kill him. He's family. Come on, God, where are you at? This is not of his fault. And listen, can you imagine what's going through Joseph's mind? God, I didn't do anything wrong. Why is this happening to me? Where is God in this? There's nothing redeeming about what happened to Joseph. Now, isn't that what it feels like a lot of times for us? When you look at your circumstances, or you look at your marriage, or you look at your job, or you see how your children are acting, or you open your checking account, or whatever it may be, and it's just a mess, and you think, come on, God, this is not my fault. I didn't do this. I mean, I'm a party of it, but I didn't do this. I didn't cause this. And you wonder, where can God be in the midst of all of this? Well, the story says in Genesis 39, by the way, we don't read Genesis 38 in church. It's just too X-rated. You can go read that for yourself. That's my ploy to get you to read the Bible. But it really is. Again, why would you include this part in the Bible? But it's there. So Genesis 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, buys Joseph, and then the next phrase just seems so out of place. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. Now, the Lord was with Joseph, I mean, we go, no. The Lord's not with Joseph. That's not what it looks like when the Lord is with you. If the Lord were with Joseph, he'd be at home with his mom and dad. You know, if God was in charge, good things would be happening to good people, and bad things would be happening to bad people. And Joseph's not a bad guy in this story. He didn't do anything wrong, right? That's the process that we have in our minds. That's what we think. I mean, and there are times we feel that way. Okay, God, I've been faithful. You know, well, okay, I haven't been that faithful, but I haven't been unfaithful completely, and then we compare ourselves. I mean, look at that guy over there. I mean, he's a liar, and she's a cheater, and they both steal, and God, I'm nothing like them, and yet everything they touch turns to gold, and for me, everything I touch turns to dust. I mean, clearly, you're with him, and you're not with me. That's what we think. If the Lord was with Joseph when his brothers grabbed him, God would have struck them down, and a voice from heaven would have said, don't touch him, I'm with him. But that didn't happen. See, so if the Lord was with Joseph, why is he assaulted? Why is he thrown into this pit? Why is he sold as a slave? Why is he bought as a slave? It messes with our view, and it messes with our understanding of God. And yet that's the point. That's what God wants us to see. The Lord was with Joseph in the midst of this. And Joseph became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. And the Egyptians didn't even believe in Joseph's God. And yet, here's Potiphar. You know, for that matter, maybe Joseph was struggling to believe in God at that moment. But here's Potiphar who's watching Joseph. He watches how he responds. He sees the look in his eye, and he attributes that to Joseph's God. And he sees God in that. So Joseph, verse 4, Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him an overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in his house and his field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concerns about anything but the food he ate. Now, this is so important for us, okay? When we learn to respond in all circumstances as if God is with us, others will notice. Others will take notice of your life. When we learn to respond in all circumstances as if God is with us, others will pay attention. They'll take notice. They will see what's happening in your life. They'll realize there's something significant here. There's something about this person. They're relying on someone that they can't see. They're living for something they have no visible way of seeing it visibly, but they're just hoping in it. Well, do you know why Potiphar noticed? We find out later in the story. Because Joseph was simply doing what anyone would do in those circumstances, who's confident that God was with him. Joseph didn't try and change his circumstances. He didn't try and run away. In his circumstances, he just did what anybody would do who's confident that God is with him. Now listen, you and I have had the benefit and the privilege of seeing people live like that. People in the midst, of difficult circumstances, in the deepest valleys of life. We have seen those people seem completely unaffected, completely undeterred. They are staying the course. They are faithful. They talk about the Lord. They are grateful for what He's done. And we go, how can you have that kind of attitude? How is it possible? Because it's very simple. They're living like someone who is absolutely confident that God is with them. And we admire those people. But when those people are us, no. That's a lot harder, right? That's a struggle for us. Because we expect God to behave a certain way. Middle of verse 6, it says, Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eye on Joseph and said, Lie with me. The literal translation says, sex now. That's what it says. And once again, this is not Joseph's fault. You can't blame guys like me and Joseph for being handsome in form and appearance. It's just not possible. I couldn't do that with a straight face. But he really didn't do anything wrong. And it's almost like God has put him in this no-win situation. And in verse 8 it says, But he refused, and he said to his master's wife, Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I. nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. And then check this out. Here's how we know. Here's how we know. Joseph is living as a man who is absolutely confident that God is with him. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God? In spite of all he's been through, in spite of being stripped, thrown in a pit, sold into slavery, bought as a slave, in spite of all those things, here's a man who's still looking to God as his judge, as his guide, as his authority, as his promise. That's amazing to me. Why in the world would he declare his commitment to God in the midst of these circumstances when clearly it doesn't appear God's been committed to him? You know, it's like, what has God done for him lately? And now he's in this situation where it almost seems that God has put him there. And no matter his decision, the outcome is not going to be good. But it's simple. Joseph knew it wasn't his place to sort it all out. He knew it wasn't his place to re-engineer the situation. His responsibility was easy, but not easy, but simple. Just keep doing what anyone would do who is absolutely confident that God is with him. And that's what he did. He said, I can't do it. It's a sin against my God. I mean, isn't that amazing? He just remains so faithful to that. For us, we pray Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We don't have an answer on Thursday. And Friday, we've decided to throw our hands up and forget God. We'll just handle it ourselves, right? We'll just do our own thing. That's not Joseph. It's hard to remain faithful when there's no evidence that God is with you. That's why every single day you have to make a choice. We all have to make a choice every day. You can make decisions based on your interpretations of your circumstances, or you can make a decision based on the promises of God, that He is with you. You can make decisions based on the interpretation of your circumstances. Man, this is bad. God doesn't care. Nobody's looking out for me. I got to look out for myself. Or you can make a decision based on the promises that God has given us, that He is with us. He doesn't turn His back on us. So Joseph remains faithful to God, and God rewards him. You want to hear how God rewards him? Verse 10. And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her to lie beside her or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. Speaking of Potiphar, Potiphar's brought this Hebrew in to laugh at us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. So it's alarms and it's bells and it's whistles going off. She's screaming, He's trying to rape me, he's trying to rape me. And Potiphar comes rolling up in the house, and there's his trusted servant, the one he's trusted with everything, who is now standing there without his robe on. He may not be wearing anything, and it looks as if he has betrayed him. And get this, Joseph is punished for exactly the same thing he was trying to avoid. Okay? He's punished for practicing self-control. He practiced self-control. And he's still punished. He gets the exact same punishment he would have received even though he was faithful. If he hadn't been faithful, same punishment. He gets the same punishment either way. See, that's what happens to us. That's when we get ready to throw our hands up. Whenever we try and nothing works, we end up with the same result. And we go, well, what's the point in trying? And it says, as soon as Potiphar, his master, heard the words that his wife spoke to him, This is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was in their prison. But here it is again. But the Lord was with Joseph. At which point, if I'm Joseph, I'm thinking, whoa, time out. God, I don't want you to be with me anymore. I'm done. Go be with somebody else. I need a break. Go be with my brothers. They started this. You go be with them. I'd like to see you be with them the way you've been with me. Go be with them. Go be with Potiphar's wife. I just need some downtime. You know, anybody but me. And listen, anywhere but here. The Lord was with him in prison. I mean, that doesn't feel like a blessing. I mean, if God's with you, isn't it supposed to feel like a blessing? Aren't you supposed to feel, something significant about that? I don't want to face these circumstances if this is what it means for God to be with me. At least that's what I think. Do you see how relevant the Bible is to our lives? Because this is where we all have been or will be. And it says in verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph, and it showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keepers of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Now let's be honest, okay? If this were your story by this point, would you not have bailed on God already? Years are passing, okay? Years are passing. It doesn't feel like God's with me. I've been thrown in a pit, stripped of my clothes, sold into slavery, bought as a slave, accused of rape, a crime I did not commit. I did not sleep with that woman, and yet I'm in prison. That was a joke for some of you. We would bail on God, and Joseph doesn't. When we don't see God quickly move in our circumstances, we decide God's not here. God's not here, and so I've got to make something happen. It's only when we trust and look for God in the circumstances that we find Him. And it's only when we respond to our circumstances as if God is with us that we see Him. We have to look and we have to respond if we want to find God in our circumstances. We don't have time to read the rest of this story, but let me just tell you what happens. Joseph is successful in prison. Everything is under his control. He is the man in charge, and the warden doesn't worry about anything. And then one day, 2 men from Pharaoh's court are put into prison, 2 men that served the king, Pharaoh, a baker and a cupbearer. Of course, the baker bakes the bread. The cupbearer tastes the wine for Pharaoh to make sure no one's trying to poison him. That job opens on a regular basis. But both these guys work for Pharaoh. But something happens, and now they're in prison. Pharaoh's mad at them, and he just, one day, you left, crumbs laying here or something. You're going to prison, and are you sure you tasted that wine? I didn't see you taste that wine. Are you trying to kill me? You're going to prison too. We don't know why or how they end up in prison. And they each have a dream. Okay? They each have a dream. And Joseph is a bit of a dream interpreter, remember? And he tells them, tell me your dream and I'll tell you what it means. So the cupbearer tells him his dream, and Joseph says, well, I've got some good news for you. If what I believe your dream to say is true, in 3 days you're going to be out of here. In fact, you're going to be out of here, and Pharaoh is going to restore you, and you will once again serve Pharaoh. And then the baker goes, well, now me. Tell mine. Let me tell you mine. You tell me what happens. So he does. And Joseph looks at him and goes, well, I don't know how to say this, but it's not great news. In 3 days, you're going to be out of here too. But they're going to take you out and they're going to cut off your head because that's what Pharaoh's going to do. And Joseph tells the cupbearer that this is my prediction. Tells the baker the same thing. He also tells the cupbearer, hey, if my prediction does come true, when you get out and you have an audience with Pharaoh because you'll be in there tasting the wine, would you mention me to Pharaoh? And of course, the cupbearer is going, dude, if I get out of here and your prediction comes true, I'm going to tell everybody about you. Of course I'll tell Pharaoh about you. And it says 3 days go by and the dreams come true. And in verse 23, chapter 40, I believe, it says, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. But there's good news. The Lord was with Joseph, right? What? That's good news. I'm in prison. I'm still in prison. He stays in prison. I mean, have you had those moments when you've stared at a ceiling and thought my prayers haven't been answered? I can't even get my prayers past that ceiling. The promises I thought God gave me, they've not been fulfilled. And we're at the point of losing hope. We're at the point of giving up. And we ask the question, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to get through this? And the answer is simple. You just need to take the next appropriate step that anyone who is confident God is with them would take. It's that simple. You just take the next step that anyone who is confident that God is with them would take. See, you have a choice every single day to respond to how you interpret your circumstances or to trust God in your circumstances. You can interpret them or you can trust God in them. You get to make that decision. So the question is, every single day of your life, are you willing? Are you willing to be confident, absolutely confident that God is with you, and then respond accordingly? See, if left to myself, if left to yourself, we'd say, well, clearly God doesn't love me. Clearly God's not with me. Clearly God doesn't care. There probably isn't even a God. That would be us, right? Or you could just simply trust God. Trust that what God says about Himself is true and that what He has promised to do, He will do. So the question for you and the question for me is very simple. Do you judge and measure God and His will for your life by your circumstances? Or do you decide to live as someone who is absolutely confident that God is with them? And if you will live as someone who is absolutely confident that God is with you, you will see God in your circumstances. So what would someone in your marriage do if they were absolutely confident that God was with you? What would someone do in terms of parenting your children or maybe dealing with older adolescent children who the relationship's just not what you want it to be? Or maybe it's grown children and they're far from you. What would someone in that situation do if they were absolutely confident that God was with them? What would someone do in your job? What would someone do in your situation without a job? What would someone do in your career field? They were absolutely confident God was with them. You can ask the question in every arena of life. It's just that simple. What would you do if you were absolutely confident God is with you? Joseph's story doesn't end, but it will take years for us to see God in his circumstances. And yet Joseph never loses hope. Joseph never gives up. Joseph never stops living as someone who's absolutely confident that God is with him. So this morning, we're going to close. The band's going to come and do one more song. But as they come and do that song, I want to ask you, at what place are you in your life where you feel like you're just ready to give up? You're ready to throw your hands up. You're ready to throw the towel in because you can't see God. Things just aren't working out for you. Things aren't going the way you thought they should. It's not going well in your marriage. It's not going well with your children or at your job or in school, whatever it is that you're involved in. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you have conflict in relationships with your family. Maybe it's a mom or a dad. You're just ready to throw in the towel. You don't see anything good coming. And you certainly can't see God in the midst of it. Well, let me just ask you, what would someone who's absolutely confident that God is with them do? Maybe you should just do that. Because I believe when you do that, you'll see God in the midst of it. Father, thank you this morning for the power of your word. God, for the stories that you've included, that God are real stories. These are real life stories. And God, I just want to ask you this morning to move and work in each person here. Because God, every one of us can find ourselves struggling with these very things. God, we're at places where it just seems like there's no hope. We don't have anywhere else to turn. We're just ready to give up. And yet, God, it's in those moments that you move and work. You just move and work in a way that God, we see you show up. And God, you're working behind the scenes all the time. And I just want to ask you, God, for the person sitting here this morning who struggled to find you, for the person sitting here this morning, God, who can't seem to see you in all that's going on, that God, today, maybe for the first time in a long time, they're just going to make a decision that they're going to trust you no matter what. That, God, they're going to trust you with where they are, with what's happening, and that, God, they're just going to let you do what you do. Let you unfold the circumstances. Let you show up, and trust that in time you'll be faithful to your promise, faithful to your word. So, God, I pray that for every person here this morning, that they would seek you in the midst of these circumstances that seem so chaotic and so out of control. Father, we thank you that you're that kind of God, a loving, personal God. And God, I pray that today we would see that and know that firsthand. Amen.
You're my portion. Have a great Sunday, everybody. We're so glad to see you at Lifeway today, and we will see everybody next week.